I am Amara Lewis, 34 years old, and for most of my life, I learned how to exist quietly in places that were supposed to feel like home. I learned how to make myself small without being asked. I learned how to smile politely, speak carefully, and disappear even while standing in the middle of a crowded room. On the night everything finally changed, I was standing near a long buffet table, holding a small white plate I hadn't touched. The hall around me glowed with warm lights that reflected off polished marble floors. Crystal glasses clinked softly. People laughed easily. From the outside, the family reunion looked perfect. It was being held at the Grand Astor Hall, one of the most expensive event centers outside Brookhaven Ridge, a wealthy suburb near Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind of place designed to impress, where flaws were hidden under beauty and money made silence feel acceptable. Before we go any further, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or felt like you had to earn love by suffering quietly, this story will understand you. I was dressed neatly but simply. Nothing loud. Nothing that would draw attention. I had spent years learning how to blend into backgrounds like this. Smile politely. Don't speak too much. Don't stand out. I came because I always did, holding on to a quiet hope that maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, I would feel included instead of tolerated. My father, Leonard Lewis, stood at the front of the hall near the microphone. He was in his early 60s, tall and confident, with the posture of a man who had spent decades being respected. People admired him. Church leaders nodded along to his words. Business partners laughed at his jokes a little louder than necessary. To them, Leonard Lewis was discipline, success, and authority wrapped into one man. To me, he was a stranger who shared my last name. I barely noticed when the background music faded. I only looked up when I heard my own name spoken into the microphone. Leonard cleared his throat and smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Before we continue," he said, "I need to address something important. Family is about values. About standards." The room slowly grew quiet. Conversations faded. Forks paused midair. He turned his head slightly in my direction. "Some people," he continued, "choose instability instead of responsibility. They mistake independence for maturity and call it strength." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, curious. Leonard went on, his voice growing firmer. He talked about daughters who were still unmarried. Women who couldn't seem to settle down. People who lived comfortably without contributing anything meaningful. He didn't say my name again, but he didn't have to. One by one, faces turned toward me. I could feel the weight of their eyes before I fully registered it. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. "She thinks she's smarter than her place," Leonard said, shaking his head slowly. "But confidence without discipline becomes a burden to everyone else." Whispers moved through the room like a wave. Then he said it clearly. "I don't want bad energy here. If you can't respect this family, you shouldn't represent it. Amara, you need to leave." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. The humiliation was sharp, clean, and public. My stepmother, Maribel, stood beside him. She didn't protest. She didn't look shocked. If anything, her expression held relief, as if a problem she had tolerated for years was finally being removed. My younger half-siblings avoided my eyes at first, then exchanged small, satisfied smiles with one another. I waited for my body to react, for anger, tears, something, but nothing came. My hands were steady as I placed the untouched plate back on the table. I picked up my purse. No arguing. No explaining. I learned long ago that explaining only gave people more opportunities to twist my words and hurt me deeper. As I walked through the hall, people pretended not to stare. Some looked away quickly. Others watched openly, curiosity shining in their eyes. No one stopped me. No one spoke up. Outside, the night air felt cooler, quieter, almost gentle in comparison to what I had just left behind. I unlocked my car and sat behind the wheel. For a few seconds, I didn't move. Then one quiet thought rose above everything else. He just kicked out the person paying for all of this. I didn't smile. I didn't feel proud. I felt calm. This wasn't a story about shouting or revenge. It was about a woman who had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated for years. And now, without saying a single word, the world she quietly held together was about to feel her absence. I was Leonard Lewis's first child, born during his first marriage, back when he still had dreams that didn't revolve around control and image. I remembered a softer version of him once. A man who smiled more, who came home earlier, who who spoke gently to my mother. Everything changed when my mother died. I was 14 years old when I lost her. One day, there were warm hands brushing my hair before school. The next day, there was silence. My father didn't know how to handle grief, so he avoided it. He buried himself in work, meetings, and public appearances. At home, he became distant. Not cruel in obvious ways, just absent. People around me repeated the same advice. Be grateful. Don't complain. Your father works hard. So I learned to stay quiet. I learned that speaking too much made me difficult. Asking questions made me ungrateful. Challenging men, especially my father, was disrespectful. When Leonard remarried, the house became fuller but lonelier. Maribel moved in with clear rules and expectations. I wasn't mistreated openly, but I wasn't embraced either. I was tolerated. My needs came last. My feelings were ignored. My presence was easy to forget. And that was how I learned to disappear. By the time I turned 20, I understood something clearly and painfully. Staying in that house meant slowly disappearing forever. No one had to tell me to leave. My body already knew. Every room felt smaller. Every conversation reminded me that I was tolerated, not wanted. So I left quietly, the way I had learned to do everything else. There was no dramatic goodbye, no confrontation. Just a suitcase, a few clothes, and the quiet decision to choose myself before I vanished completely. The years that followed were not easy. I worked small jobs at first: office assistant, data clerk, night receptionist. Jobs where people barely noticed me unless something went wrong. At night, I took classes. Accounting, business operations, risk management. I lived in tiny apartments where the walls were thin and the heating barely worked, but for the first time, the silence felt safe. No tension, no judgment, no pressure to perform for love. Slowly, I began to understand how systems worked, how money moved quietly behind the scenes, how contracts were written to protect power, how small errors, if ignored, could destroy entire businesses. I learned that chaos rarely announces itself loudly. It grows in silence, in unchecked details, in assumptions that someone else is paying attention. That realization changed everything for me. Over time, I built a career in financial operations and compliance. It wasn't flashy work. No applause. No spotlight. But it was essential. I became the person companies called when payments stalled, when vendors threatened legal action, when events were on the verge of collapse. I didn't fix problems with noise. I fixed them with structure, patience, and precision. Ironically, my father's company became one of those companies. Not directly at first. Through consulting firms, third-party contracts, layers of distance that made it easy for Leonard Lewis to never know who was actually holding things together. I managed vendor payments, structured event financing, flagged legal risks before they became public disasters. I smoothed disputes quietly, efficiently, and without drawing attention. Leonard never asked who handled the work. As long as problems disappeared, he took credit. At church dinners and business events, I watched him speak proudly about discipline, leadership, and family values. People praised his success. They called him a strong provider, a great father. I stood nearby, invisible as always, listening to strangers applaud a man who didn't know me. I never corrected him. A part of me still hoped. I hoped one day he would notice my name on a document. Ask a question. Connect the dots. See me not as a burden, but as someone capable. Someone valuable. That hope kept me attending family gatherings long after it stopped hurting and started numbing me. I smiled at reunions. I listened as Leonard spoke about unity and respect. Even when I felt like a ghost standing beside him, I told myself maybe this time would be different. The reunion at the Grand Astor Hall felt important. Big. Public. Carefully curated. I thought maybe this was the moment. Not to be praised, but to finally belong. Instead, it became the moment everything broke. After I walked out of the hall that night, my phone started vibrating almost immediately. Vendor approvals pending. Payment releases paused. Authorization requests waiting. None of it surprised me. My name was connected to nearly every financial process behind that event. I was the final checkpoint. The quiet gatekeeper no one noticed until I stepped away. Sitting in my car, I understood something clearly. I had a choice. I could cancel everything. Expose the truth publicly. Humiliate Leonard the way he humiliated me. I didn't. Instead, I did something quieter and more final. I opened the authorization settings and withdrew my approval. One by one. No angry messages. No explanations. I didn't block anyone. I simply stepped back from the role I was never thanked for. Inside the hall, the effects weren't immediate, but they were inevitable. The sound system cut out mid-speech. Leonard's confident voice disappeared into silence. People laughed at first, assuming it was a minor technical issue. Someone tapped the microphone. Nothing happened. Servers stopped refilling food trays. Catering supervisors whispered urgently to their staff. Transportation drivers outside refused to move without confirmed payments. Confusion spread. My stepmother tried to control the narrative. She blamed me quietly, then openly. My half-siblings didn't hesitate to mock me online. Vague posts, laughing emojis, comments about grown people throwing tantrums. They never used my name, but everyone knew. Across town, my phone rang. A catering manager asked about payment approval. An audio technician wanted to know why access was cut. A transportation coordinator sounded anxious. I answered calmly every time. Yes, my name is on the contract, I said. But I'm no longer authorized to approve payments. You'll need to speak with Mr. Lewis. Some were confused. Some were annoyed. A few apologized. Back at the event, panic finally reached Leonard. Messages from him came fast. Angry at first. Accusatory. Then guilt-filled. Then desperate. I read them slowly, feeling old wounds open. The guilt he trained into me, the obligation he used as control. For a moment, I closed my eyes. This was the pattern. Hurt me. Then remind me I owed him. Reject me. Then claim ownership. But something was different now. I wasn't fighting the urge to fix things. What hurt wasn't the chaos. It was realizing how long I had accepted this treatment just to feel included. So I turned my phone face down. For the first time in my life, I let silence speak for me. The days that followed were quiet, but they carried weight. Reputation doesn't collapse in one loud moment. It erodes in whispers, in hesitation, in unanswered calls. By the next morning, videos from the reunion were already circulating. Short clips. No context. Just the sound cutting out mid-speech. Guests standing around confused. People leaving early. No one said exactly what happened, but everyone felt it. Something about Leonard Lewis no longer looked solid. Church members whispered after service. Business partners made careful phone calls. The reunion that was supposed to celebrate power became something people avoided mentioning. Leonard felt the shift immediately. His phone buzzed constantly, but the tone had changed. Questions replaced praise. Silence replaced admiration. Respect, once automatic, now felt thin. That was when he called me. At first, there was no shouting. His voice was tight, controlled, carrying the kind of anger that tries to sound reasonable. You need to fix this, he said. You created a mess, and you need to clean it up. I listened without interrupting. Years ago, I would have rushed to explain, to soften his anger, to take responsibility for pain that wasn't mine. This time, I waited. When he finally paused, I spoke calmly. I've been running the financial operations for years, I said. Payments, contracts, event financing, risk issues. There was silence on the line. You never asked who handled it, I continued. You never wanted to know. You just took credit when things worked. He tried to deny it, but the truth settled between us. Slowly, he understood something he had refused to see for years. His authority didn't stand on its own. It stood on my quiet labor, on my patience, on my silence. The realization didn't bring regret. It brought fear. His voice changed. The anger softened into something almost gentle. I didn't mean it like that, he said quickly. You know how I am. I was under pressure. You're my daughter. We can move past this. I heard it clearly. This wasn't an apology for hurting me. It was an apology for losing control. I'm sorry if you felt embarrassed, he added. Let's not ruin everything over one night. I closed my eyes. I had heard versions of this my entire life. Small apologies that asked me to return without changing anything. Words that sounded caring, but carried the same demand. Come back and fix it. No, I said softly. He froze. What do you mean, no? I'm not fixing this, I replied. And I'm not coming back. The silence that followed was heavy. I could have exposed him. I could have told people the truth about who kept his business running. I could have embarrassed him publicly. I didn't. That was the real ending. I ended the call not in anger, but in clarity. Over the next few weeks, I exited every contract legally and cleanly. I followed every rule. Signed every document. Gave proper notice. Emails were short and professional. Phone calls were calm. No explanations. No emotional language. Just distance. Without me, things didn't fall apart loudly. They weakened slowly. Deadlines slipped. Small issues turned into larger ones. Some contracts were lost. Others were quietly restructured without Leonard's involvement. People who once praised him now hesitated. He never called again. Pride still mattered more to him than repair. For me, the silence felt strange at first. Then it felt peaceful. I started therapy. In a quiet room, I talked about my mother for the first time in years. Love without respect is not love. It is control. It is obligation. It is survival disguised as family. I began building boundaries. I stopped answering calls that left me feeling small. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already decided who I was. I learned that saying no didn't make me cruel. It made me honest. Meanwhile, the family changed. Without me quietly holding everything together, tension surfaced. My stepmother's influence weakened. She could no longer hide behind smooth events. Words that once carried weight began to fall flat. People remembered things differently now. They noticed gaps I used to fill without recognition. Some relatives reached out privately, unsure of what to say. Others stayed silent. I didn't chase anyone. I understood now that being the glue had been costing me too much. Months later, I hosted a small dinner in my apartment. Nothing fancy. Soft music. Simple food cooked with care. The table was small, but everyone around it had chosen me. These were people who checked on me when I went quiet. People who listened without judging. People who never asked me to shrink. There were no speeches. No competition. Just warmth. As we laughed and passed dishes, I realized something quietly powerful. This is what safety feels like. Not loud love. Not approval that comes and goes. Just presence. Just respect. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone in my living room. The city outside was calm. My phone was still. I thought back to the night I was told to leave. Being kicked out didn't break me. It showed me where I never belonged, and where I finally do. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but it no longer controlled me. I wasn't waiting for someone else to choose me anymore. I already had. The story doesn't end with revenge or applause. It ends with peace, with dignity, with a woman who walked away from what hurt her and built a life that feels whole. And that kind of freedom, quiet, earned, and real, is enough. If this story touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from.